In the opulent corridors of majestic palaces, fortunes once gushed as freely as fine wine. Yet, hidden beneath the splendor of golden crowns and regal paintings lies a stark reality. A number of Britain's kings, queens, princes, and princesses met their ends nearly destitute. From exiled rulers seeking charity in foreign lands to contemporary royals ensnared in crippling debt, their fall from grace was as striking as their reigns. These narratives stray far from fairy tales of unending riches. Instead, they serve as poignant reminders of privilege that crumbled into despair. Join us as we unveil the stories of 25 British royals who succumbed to poverty, where crowns could not shield them from the consequences of extravagance, exile, and destiny. But before we plunge into these overlooked royal misfortunes, remember to subscribe and become part of our expanding family of history enthusiasts. Each week, we unveil new tales of power, controversy, and decline that history books often overlook. And we invite you to share in the comments your location and the current time. Are you experiencing the midnight calm in London, or basking in the dawn in Manila? We are eager to connect with you on this royal expedition through the ages. In a tale of grandeur intertwined with downfall, we meet George IV, once Prince Regent and later King. Few royals have so vividly embodied the perilous blend of opulence and despair as he did. Born into luxury as the firstborn of George III, he was a man driven by excessive cravings, rich, resplendent, and perpetually ravenous for life's pleasures. Even before ascending the throne, his reputation for lavish living was unparalleled. As Prince of Wales, he squandered vast fortunes on diamonds, extravagant attire, mistresses, fine horses, and architectural wonders. Governance and charity were foreign to him. Instead, his heart pulsated with indulgence. His nights were prolonged by feasts that extended into the early hours, champagne poured freely, and gambling tables claimed fortunes. By his mid-twenties, his debts had reached astronomical heights, equivalent to tens of millions in today's terms. His borrowing spanned the city, often under pseudonyms, as he mortgaged his future income to fund his revelries. Time and again, Parliament had to intervene to shield the royal heir from public dishonor or imprisonment due to unpaid debts. Each intervention came with promises to reform, to practice moderation, and to embrace responsibility. Yet, George's commitments were as fleeting as his sobriety. The most notorious testament to his excess was the Royal Pavilion at Brighton. What began as a seaside retreat evolved into an oriental spectacle adorned with domes and lavish interiors filled with intricate designs and gold embellishments. He enlisted the talents of John Nash, the visionary architect who later crafted significant parts of Regent Street and Buckingham Palace. This pavilion morphed into a sanctuary for his pleasures, overflowing with luxury, yet simultaneously deepening his financial chaos. George's personal extravagance sparked public outrage while ordinary citizens endured the hardships of post-war economic decline. Satirical artists, like James Gillray and George Cruikshank, rendered him into grotesque caricatures, depicting a lavish monarch feasting as his people went hungry. Such portrayals, though harsh, echoed a larger frustration. As Parliament raised taxes to support this lavish lifestyle, the people could only watch in disbelief. His romantic entanglements further intertwined with his turbulence. Illegally wed to the Catholic widow Maria Fitzherbert in secret, he became both emotionally invested and politically entangled. When this union was deemed invalid, he entered a loveless marriage with his cousin, Caroline of Brunswick, driven by financial and diplomatic necessity. Their repugnance for one another fueled scandals, and Caroline's subsequent exile and trial only added layers of scandal and expense. Even upon becoming king, George's tendency to self-indulgence did not wane. He continued to oversee costly renovations in palaces like Windsor and Buckingham, piling onto his ever-growing debts. He adorned his life with exquisite art, sumptuous banquets, and wardrobes fit for royalty, all while neglecting the ailing treasury. Obesity, gout, and his relentless appetites took a toll on his health, and by the end, he struggled to ascend stairs unaided. Despite his declining condition, costly soirees and silk furnishings persisted, extravagant feasts that few could appreciate. When he passed in 1830, George IV's legacy lay in ruins. The once charismatic figure, cultured and enthusiastic about the arts, had been overshadowed by the image of a debauched ruler who squandered the nation's wealth. Many of his cherished possessions were discreetly sold off to settle outstanding debts. The self-proclaimed godlike figure had reduced himself to a caricature of disgrace. George IV's life serves as a poignant lesson in the dangers of unchecked extravagance. He possessed every opportunity to reign magnificently but chose illusion over duty. His debts transcended mere finance. They reflected a monarchy estranged from its subjects. And as the nation laid the corpulent king to rest, murmurs of hidden debts among other royals trailed behind, echoing the same tragic narrative of grandiosity melting into disgrace, not unlike the fate of his unfortunate brother, a duke entangled in similar misdeeds. In the annals of history, the Duke of York stands as a poignant figure, overshadowed by his elder brother George IV, who epitomized the lavish display of royalty. Unlike the flamboyant George, Frederick Augustus, the Duke of York, reflected a more somber narrative, one enthralled by temptation and unwise choices that gradually unraveled his stature. The second son of George III, Frederick aspired to a legacy of military honor and societal respect. However, despite his noble demeanor and disciplined military role, he found himself ensnared in a web of debt, scandal, and dissatisfaction, which methodically diminished his dignity and resources. Known for his amiable nature, Frederick's sense of humor endeared him to both his fellow soldiers and the court. In a time of war and national duty, he genuinely aimed to serve, ultimately being named Commander-in-Chief in 1795. His reforms in military administration led to improved conditions for soldiers, garnering him commendations that were rare among Hanoverian princes. Yet, the same man who donned a general's uniform found his personal impulses, including a voracious appetite for luxury and gambling, unmanageable. In late 18th century London, a society driven by cards and clubs began to take its toll on Frederick, as he frequented the high-stakes gaming tables, experiencing crippling losses that outpaced his significant allowances. To cope, he resorted to unsavory measures, mortgaging jewelry, borrowing from acquaintances, and seeking financial assistance from the Crown and Parliament alike. His financial plight mirrored that of George IV, leading to near constant embarrassment for the monarchy. However, it was his tumultuous relationship with the ambitious courtesan Marian Clark that truly unraveled him. Falling deeply for her around 1803, he surrounded her with luxuries that strained his finances. When funds dwindled, she unscrupulously sold army commissions in his name, igniting a scandal that would reverberate through Parliament and the press in 1809. The public's fascination only deepened when newspapers illustrated the scheme, turning Frederick into a figure of both pity and scorn. Although no definitive proof implicated him in bribery, the perception lingered, ultimately forcing his resignation. Although he later returned to office under questionable circumstances, the stain on his reputation was indelible. His reputation as indulgent and susceptible to manipulation overshadowed any military accomplishments. Financial repercussions were dire. Clark's extravagant lifestyle drained thousands from Frederick's coffers monthly. After their split, he further deepened his financial woes in attempts to silence her. Selling off horses, furniture, and valuables became necessary as credit thirst hovered ominously. He faced the need to live frugally for the first time, hiding from public view as the once dashing prince descended into obscurity. Despite his fall from grace, Frederick maintained a degree of public sympathy, partly due to his affable nature and willingness to be self-deprecating. He inspired the nursery rhyme The Grand Old Duke of York, which, through its mocking lyrics, ensured his name endured in British popular culture. His life, marked by squandered potential, faded charm, and a lack of legitimate heirs, came to an end in 1827, leaving a legacy overshadowed by unfulfilled promise. While Parliament expressed condolences, the truth of Frederick's demise lingered, an illustrative tale of how vanity and excess can strip a prince of his royalty's sheen. His downfall offers not just a glimpse into Frederick's life but reflects the recklessness emblematic of his brother George IV's reign. It serves as a cautionary tale about gambling, indulgence, and romance that could drive even a royal to the brink of dissolution. As these captivating royal stories unfold, be sure to hit subscribe because there's much more to uncover about the hidden tales of regality. Share in the comments your whereabouts and the current hour, as we collectively explore the enduring mysteries of royal history together, wherever you may be watching. 3. Enter Prince Henry, Duke of Cumberland and Strathern, sibling to George III. Long before the notorious excesses of George IV and the scandals surrounding the Duke of York, there existed a royal brother whose reckless lifestyle set both a precedent and a dire warning for generations that followed. Prince Henry Frederick, the younger brother of George III, epitomized the 18th century's most infamous spendthrift royals. His life resembled an endless, extravagant ball, filled with carriages, gaming houses, and secretive liaisons, ultimately crashing under the unbearable weight of debt and disgrace. Born in 1745, Henry came of age in a time when the Hanoverian dynasty sought to consolidate its reign and project an image of stability. In stark contrast to his elder brother George III, pious, disciplined, and intent on restoring the monarchy's moral respectability, Henry was flamboyant and impulsive, thoroughly enamored with pleasure. He scoffed at the dignified restraint that defined his brother's court, reveling in opulence, indulging in extravagant tastes for horses, garments, and relationships. Though he initially joined the Navy, this life failed to instill the discipline he desperately needed. Command was brief. He preferred the glamorous salons of London with their alluring gaming tables over the harshness of the sea. By his mid-20s, staggering debts accumulated from his high-octane lifestyle. Relentless creditors pursued him, but his royal status shielded him, for a time. Loyal friends occasionally paid off his immediate dues, but fresh debts swiftly followed. His financial collapse was inextricably linked to his romantic exploits. Henry was known for his charm and impulsivity, most notably demonstrated during his affair with Lady Grosvenor, wife of the wealthy Earl Grosvenor. When the Earl unearthed the liaison, he retaliated by suing Henry for what was then termed criminal conversation, a euphemism for adultery. The sensational court case of 1770 captivated the public, saturated with graphic revelations and scandalous testimonies. The damage awarded against Henry was monumental, but the subsequent moral humiliation was even more profound. An infuriated George III saw his brother's actions as a disgrace to the royal family. However, the most shocking scandal arose 2 years later with Henry's clandestine marriage to Anne Horton, a widow from a common background, the daughter of an Irish peer. Conducted without royal consent, this union sent shockwaves through society and politics alike. Under prevailing laws, marriages of those close to the throne required the monarch's approval, and George III perceived this union not merely as a personal affront but a potential threat to the very structure of succession. To this end, Parliament enacted the Royal Marriages Act of 1772, compelling all descendants of George II to seek the monarch's permission to marry. This law, shaped by Henry's reckless affair, haunted royal generations, causing personal strife and political discord for centuries. Financially, Henry's marriage offered no reprieve. Anne's limited fortune couldn't sustain his extravagant lifestyle. They flitted between rented homes and retreats abroad, perpetually dodging creditors. Society remembers them not for their status, but for a relentless string of unpaid debts and petty intrigues. Gambling, horse racing, and maintaining a lavish household remained his pursuits, while Parliament chose not to rescue him, viewing him as a cautionary tale rather than a dignified prince. By the time of his death in 1790, Duke Henry's fortunes lay in tatters. The bold prince of his youth had faded into relative obscurity, mere whispers of his past grandeur replaced by monetary fears. Many possessions were sold off to settle debts, others seized by relentless creditors. His unconventional marriage, while affectionate, ultimately isolated him from his royal family. Upon his passing, obituaries reflected a mix of pity and scorn. A prince once cloaked in glamour, now remembered chiefly for his excesses. Nevertheless, Prince Henry's legacy endures, reshaping royal law and serving as a poignant reminder that even those born into privilege are not immune to calamity. He lived and died as testament to the harsh truth that the crown offers no shield against the repercussions of indulgence. As the 18th century transitioned into a new age of royal spectacle, another royal woman would parallel this narrative of opulence and eventual despair. Princess Margaret, Countess of Snowdon, whose jewels, private retreats, and troubled marriage would echo the same tale of magnificence unraveling into debt. 4. Princess Margaret, the Countess of Snowdon, stands out as a defining figure of 20th century royalty, embodying the dual nature of modern celebrity, both its splendor and its dangers. As the younger sister of Queen Elizabeth II, Margaret was thrust into a royal legacy that was shifting from imperial dominance to global allure. Unlike her sister, who embraced a more measured and conservative approach, Margaret thrived in the limelight, exuding beauty, charm, and a captivating presence. Her life was akin to a theatrical performance, filled with festivity, style, and romance, yet obscured by underlying financial turmoil fueled by lavish spending, a tumultuous divorce, and the false premise that wealth could substitute for genuine joy. From the 1950s through the unfolding 1970s, she became one of the world's most photographed individuals, renowned for her impeccable fashion choices. Draped in Dior, adorned with Cartier jewels, she embodied the fierce independence of a royal unafraid to stand apart from her sister's influential shadow. Margaret's Caribbean sanctuary on Mystique emerged as a symbol of opulent living, a vibrant escape where she hosted rock stars and social elites. Her soirees, filled with champagne and sunlit bliss, radiated a facade of sophistication, yet the reality behind the scenes was fraught with instability. Margaret did not possess the substantial wealth her sister enjoyed. Her income relied on the civil listment for performing royal obligations, dependent on family support and her father's trust fund. But by the 1970s, rising inflation and an insatiable taste for extravagance led to financial strain. In whispers among insiders, it was suggested that she discreetly sold jewelry or borrowed funds to maintain her lifestyle without drawing media scrutiny. Her divorce from Anthony Armstrong Jones, the Earl of Snowdon, around 1978 exacerbated her financial woes. Once hailed as a fairy tale, their union fell apart under the weight of infidelity and emotional disconnection. The division of shared assets left Margaret with far less than she had been accustomed to, albeit retaining her cherished villa, Leolo. However, the costs of upkeep, wages for staff, and constant repairs placed a heavy burden on her finances. With Buckingham Palace wary of scandals during tough economic times, support for her private debts was limited even though the Queen offered subtle assistance. Margaret's public persona became increasingly controversial, overshadowed by tales of excess, smoking, and her grand gatherings. While the monarchy sought to distance itself from her indulgences, Margaret remained steadfast, refusing to diminish the symbols of her opulent life. As the 1980s progressed and her health declined, cracks emerged in her financial facade. The expenses associated with several residences, including Kensington Palace and Mystique, proved to be astronomical. By the end of the 1990s, much of her once celebrated art collection was discreetly auctioned off, revealing the extent of her financial retreat over the years to uphold appearances. After her passing in 2002, further sales of her belongings unveiled a life mired in debt and the necessity of maintaining her glamorous illusion. Beneath the glittering surface of tiaras and lavish soirees lay a narrative of borrowed time and money. Yet, even as she faced her decline, her spirit endured. Friends reminisced about her sharp wit and pride, remembering her unwavering commitment to looking splendid, regardless of circumstances. That relentless pursuit of elegance, however, exacted a steep price. Her final years were marked by isolation, health complications, and the diminishment of her once considerable fortune. A princess ensnared between the public's adoration and her personal downfall, Margaret's life encapsulated the complexities of modern royalty: wealth that lacked liquidity, fame devoid of liberty, and privilege resembling a gilded cage. Her story is an intricate blend of brilliance and sorrow, a performance that often circumvented genuine realism. As she discovered that glamour could obscure deterioration but never obliterate it, her nephew, the Duke of York, would come to realize in a different era that scandals and financial mismanagement could similarly unravel a royal legacy. 5. Prince Andrew, Duke of York. In the twilight of the 20th century and the dawn of the 21st, very few members of the British monarchy have witnessed a more dramatic and public fall from grace than Prince Andrew. Once the charming royal who fought bravely in the Falklands War and represented his family on significant trade missions, his later years spiraled into chaos marked by financial strain, controversy, and solitude. The tale of Andrew depicts a modern form of royal impoverishment, not from lost wealth, but from shattering privilege, overwhelming debts, and the decay of a once illustrious image. Born in 1960 as Queen Elizabeth's second son, Andrew basked in an upbringing swaddled in security. His nascent career in the Royal Navy cultivated respect and admiration, epitomized by iconic images of him in uniform, beaming from the cockpit of a Sea King helicopter. This helped craft a new image of royalty: brave, relatable, and contemporary. For a time, his popularity nearly matched that of Charles, the heir apparent. However, the prince's allure soon morphed into arrogance, leading him into typical royal traps: lavish spending, dubious associations, and a misguided belief in the palace's shield against consequences. His 1986 marriage to Sarah Ferguson initially appeared to be a blend of humor and vigor, yet their notorious extravagance took a toll from the get-go. Their lavish wardrobes, luxurious travels, and costly home improvements swiftly consumed their finances. Following their separation in the 1990s, Andrew found himself financially vulnerable. Although the Queen extended some support, his responsibilities as a father, social aspirations, and pricey tastes outstripped any formal earnings. He was compelled to lean on connections among the wealthy, relationships that would ultimately spell disaster. As the 2000s and 2010s unfolded, Andrew's position as the UK's special representative for trade and investment thrust him into the orbit of billionaires, oligarchs, and foreign political figures. However, instead of serving as a channel of diplomacy, it became a hotbed of scrutiny. Accusations emerged, suggesting he blurred the lines between business and personal gain, misusing his royal status to attract financial influences. Allegations of murky property transactions and questionable gifts from foreign figures seeking clout intensified. The once glamorous lifestyle that defined his existence began to resemble an entitlement devoid of accountability. Then came the scandal that would overshadow all his missteps, his links to the American financier Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender found dead in his cell. This turbulent friendship ignited public outrage, shattering Andrew's reputation. Sponsorships vanished, charities severed ties, and he was surreptitiously nudged into retirement from any official role. The financial fallout was staggering. Stripped of income and royal patronages, he became reliant on his personal assets and his mother's generosity. When a civil lawsuit charged him with alleged misconduct in the United States, the crisis deepened. Although Andrew denied any wrongdoing, he eventually settled the case out of court in 2022 for a multi-million-pound figure, believed to be partly funded by the late Queen herself. The sight of a senior royal seeking financial assistance from his mother for legal expenses was both unprecedented and profoundly embarrassing, evoking images of lost privilege. Since the Queen's passing, Andrew's circumstances have become increasingly tenuous. Reports suggest King Charles III has slashed his annual allowance, and questions swirling around his continued stay at the Royal Lodge, a lavish property demanding constant upkeep, have raised concerns about his ability to afford it. Without public engagements or genuine business initiatives to derive income, he finds himself in an unusual predicament, a royal too contentious for employment, yet too visible to vanish quietly. His narrative serves as a stark reminder of how contemporary royal poverty can coexist with inherited splendor. Andrew may not be impoverished in the conventional sense. He retains assets, receives family assistance, and lives more comfortably than the average citizen. However, the financial autonomy that once came with his title has evaporated. Once a name that opened doors, it has instead turned into a liability. His solitude, both social and financial, has led him to rely increasingly on a family eager to move onward without him. The Duke of York's downfall serves as a potent reminder that in today's monarchy, scandals can erode a reputation quicker than any financial deficit. Historically, royal poverty was linked to bad bets or poorly managed estates, but in the modern era, it can manifest as moral decline and public disgrace, diminishing a title once viewed as invaluable. As Andrew's generation faces a future stripped of easy luxuries, history echoes with the tale of another royal from centuries past, Edward VII, the Duke of Windsor, who also faced exile, dwindling resources, and desperate endeavors to preserve his opulent lifestyle. In the tapestry of modern monarchy, few narratives resonate as profoundly as that of Edward VIII, the Duke of Windsor. His choice to abandon the throne for love is lauded as a significant romantic gesture, yet it came at a steep price, one he could never have anticipated. The tale of Edward and his beloved Wallis Simpson captivates the imaginations of many, etched in history as a passionate romance. But beneath the surface of this glamorous union lies a life fraught with financial turmoil and personal decline. Once at the pinnacle of power within the British Empire, Edward found himself in relentless pursuit of comfort and reputation, all of which remained tantalizingly out of reach. Born into an enviable life in 1894, Edward, the firstborn of the future George V, was the epitome of youthful charm as the Prince of Wales. With impeccable style and undeniable charisma, he became an early media sensation, his image splashed across newspapers and postcards. Yet, his vibrant exterior concealed an insatiable restlessness. Eschewing the rigid traditions of royal obligations, he favored the lively atmosphere of jazz clubs over the formality of state events. This inclination would foreshadow the coming upheaval in his life. The arrival of American divorcee Wallis Simpson in the early 1930s marked a pivotal moment. As their relationship blossomed, it became a source of scandal that reverberated throughout British society. Wallis, with her two previous marriages and outspoken nature, was seen as entirely unsuitable for a potential queen. When Edward ascended the throne in 1936, he faced a constitutional crisis. He could marry Wallis or retain his kingship, but not both. In an act of love, Edward abdicated after less than a year, delivering a farewell speech that would echo through time, declaring his impossibility to rule without the support of the woman he loved. While this decision was romantic, the aftermath was harsh. Without royal income, he turned to a private stipend arranged by his brother, King George VI. Bound by terms that prohibited their return to Britain, Edward and Wallis faced mounting financial pressures. Their extravagant lifestyle, filled with Parisian fashion, luxurious villas, and endless travels, far outstripped their means. Despite receiving a substantial sum from the British Treasury and income from investments, Edward's struggle with financial management and his desire for indulgence rapidly depleted their resources. In a desperate bid to maintain their semblance of prestige, they began selling off personal possessions. Wallis, intent on preserving their elevated social standing, sought connections with the wealthy elite, while Edward tried to capitalize on his past through memoirs and interviews that generated both controversy and meager income. Their reliance on affluent acquaintances became infamous, as they drifted from one borrowed home to another in the United States and Europe. Their visits to Germany in the late 1930s, including a meeting with Adolf Hitler, further stained their reputation, leading to accusations of political naivety. By the time war erupted, Edward's standing in Britain was already marred with suspicion and accusations of disloyalty. His appointment as governor of the Bahamas was a calculated move to distance him from influence while providing a nominal role. After the war, Edward and Wallis settled into a lavish Parisian residence, yet their wealth was a facade. The intricate arrangements to pay their staff and sustain their lifestyle revealed a dependence on royal stipends and clandestine loans. Meanwhile, the jewels Wallis later sold for millions were often collateral for personal debts. Behind their polished appearances lay a couple ensnared in a gilded trap, unwilling to acknowledge their dwindling fortunes. As the years wore on, Edward became a shadow of his former self, aging and longing for a life beyond his grasp, a life lost the moment he renounced his crown. Upon his passing in 1972, his legacy was stripped of grandeur. The jewels and properties bequeathed to Wallis dwindled as her health and wealth also declined, culminating in sales to cover expenses after her death in 1986. Thus, Edward VII's financial downfall mirrored the emotional void created by his choices. He had forsaken duty for desire, only to find that love could not shield him from the repercussions of indulgence and self-exile. His life serves as a poignant reminder of the perils that can accompany privilege without purpose, a cautionary tale echoed by the ashes of the Duke laid to rest amidst the legacies of earlier monarchs, including the extravagant King Charles II. 7. Enter the enchanting tale of King Charles II, renowned as the Merry Monarch. His return to the English throne in 1660, following years of exile and the tumult of civil war, was met with a celebration akin to fireworks lighting up the night sky, signalling an end to Oliver Cromwell's austere Puritan rule. England craved joy, and Charles II, promising laughter and a return to revelry, captivated the nation. His moniker as the Merry Monarch radiated warmth and camaraderie. Yet, lurking beneath this vibrant facade was an unsettling financial truth. The splendor of his reign veiled a relentless battle between extravagance and insolvency. Charles II's fiscal troubles predated his crowning. During his lengthy exile on the continent, he navigated through France, the Netherlands, and Spain, often reliant on the mercy of noble patrons and chance encounters to scrape by. He returned to England, an acclaimed hero yet already weighed down by debts and unfulfilled promises. Eager to reforge royal power while keeping an eye on past excess, Parliament bestowed upon him a fixed annual income, referred to as the civil list. However, even during prosperous times, this financial support was scarcely enough to maintain the lavish lifestyle at court. The royal court shone like a grand theatre, swirling with music, fashion, and feasting, while Charles's insatiable love for entertainment knew no bounds. He undertook the reconstruction of Whitehall Palace and surrounded himself with exquisite art, all while his support of writers and composers like John Dryden and Henry Purcell defined an era but drained royal coffers. In his personal life, trouble brewed as he fathered numerous illegitimate children, spreading titles and wealth among them, while showering extravagant gifts upon their mothers. His chief mistress, Barbara Vere, Duchess of Cleveland, reportedly cost the nation a fortune rivaling that of minor wars. As the 1670s unfolded, desperation gripped Charles's financial situation. He sold royal lands, pawning jewels and forging covert treaties in exchange for funds. The Treaty of Dover in 1670 stands out starkly. Charles received money from King Louis XIV of France, trading it for vague political promises and, secretly, a nod toward Catholicism. For many in England, this arrangement was a sinking confirmation of their fears, a king who willingly bartered the nation's dignity for personal ease. Throughout these crises, Charles maintained an undeniable charm, winning hearts with his wit, even among skeptics. He was known to lighten tensions with humor or sweet-talk creditors into extending their patience. Yet, as time pressed on, it became undeniable. By the mid-1680s, royal debt surged past £1 million, an immense burden for the time. The navy went unpaid, the army lacked funds, and the royal household remained perpetually in debt. Even London's goldsmiths, previously eager to lend, began to close their doors. In the twilight of his reign, Charles II confronted exhaustion and frustration, with health failing him alongside his finances. He passed away in 1685, leaving behind a cultural legacy glowing with creativity yet financially drained. His brother, James II, faced a court teeming with grandeur but bereft of riches. Charles's story remains one of caution and celebration, where he rejuvenated the arts and reinstated joy in England, yet also illuminated the fragile underbelly of royal finances, the dangerous myth that charisma could supplant economic stability. As the flickering candles of Whitehall went dark in the wake of his death, a new royal narrative began, one not of indulgence, but of the isolation and despair faced by Queen Caroline of Brunswick, a chapter filled with its own struggles against the relentless burden of survival. 8. The tale of Queen Caroline of Brunswick, the estranged wife of George IV, is one shrouded in humor and sorrow, igniting feelings of both laughter and compassion. Her life unfolded amid humiliation and scandal, an odyssey of financial hardship where she transitioned from a hopeful princess to a social outcast, all while grappling for her dignity against one of Britain's most vengeful kings. Born in 1768 to the Duke of Brunswick and Princess Augusta, sister of George III, the roots of her marriage to the Prince of Wales in 1795 lay not in love but in political manoeuvring. George, already tangled in an affair with the secretive Catholic Maria Fitzherbert, was appalled by the union from the outset. Upon their first encounter, he reportedly recoiled, branding her as unattractive, to which she countered by finding him unappealingly rotund and intoxicated. Just days after their wedding, George deserted her, leaving only Princess Charlotte, their sole child, in the wake of their quick separation. Though officially the Princess of Wales, Caroline's existence was marked by financial instability and degraded reputation, as George did all he could to undermine her. Assigned to a modest household in Blackheath, she defied expectations by cultivating a vibrant social circle, earning notoriety for her spirited gatherings filled with gossip and music. Enraged by her audacity, George endeavored to besmirch her, launching a scandalous investigation in 1806, probing into alleged infidelities with a servant named Bartolo Pergami. The inquiry, though ultimately without conclusive evidence, severely tarnished her image and led to the tightening of her financial resources. By 1814, worn down by the relentless scrutiny and financial strife, Caroline departed Britain. Traveling across Europe, she found herself often regarded as a whimsical oddity rather than a princess, liquidating her jewelry to sustain her travels between Italy, Switzerland, and Germany. Sharing a villa with Pergami only intensified the whispers surrounding her. This exile was far from lavish, marked instead by indebtedness and prolonged solitude. When George ascended the throne in 1820, desperation compelled Caroline to return to claim her rightful title. The court's attempts to bar her from the coronation were met with a groundswell of public support, as citizens rallied in her favor, viewing her as a courageous figure against royal oppression. The sensation captivated the nation, with pamphlets and songs celebrating her as the people's queen, though her financial situation remained dire, lacking the traditional support due to a queen consort. As public sympathy swelled for her, Caroline struggled financially, housed in humble accommodations while depending on the goodwill of friends. The toll of constant trials and public pressure weighed heavily on her, and when she was denied entry to Westminster Abbey for George's coronation in 1821, her humiliation was complete. Just 3 weeks later, she passed away, some speculating heartache while others cited the exhaustion of her relentless battles. In death, Caroline emerged as a symbol of fortitude against royal oppression, her funeral procession eliciting widespread mourning and banners denoting her as the injured Queen of England. But beneath the emotional surface lay a bitter reality. Her final years were marred by poverty, her dignity eroded by relentless legal struggles and her husband's wrath. Caroline's narrative lays bare the plight of women within royal institutions, bearing titles devoid of authority, notoriety stripped of safety. She left this world in debt, with her belongings scattered, yet her resolute spirit left a profound legacy of defiance. The woman once derided as frivolous transformed into an unexpected beacon for justice amidst the monarchy's cold disregard. Her death might have closed a chapter of royal adversity, but another tale beckoned, heralding the struggles faced by her brother-in-law James II, a deposed monarch who, centuries earlier, had known the bitter truth that royal lineage could not shield him from the harsh realities of dependence on foreign charity. Chapter 9. The Tragic Tale of James II, 7th of Scotland. In the annals of British history, few sovereigns have faced such a dramatic descent from prosperity as King James II of England, born James VII of Scotland. As the younger son of Charles I, James's life was intricately woven with themes of rebellion, exile, and unyielding faith. Early on, his existence shimmered in the light of royalty, yet it was forever tinged by the shadows of loss. The brutal execution of his father during the tumult of the Civil War, followed by the family's subsequent exile, instilled in him a haunting fear of instability and a precarious dependence on wealth and favor from foreign courts. Irony would soon embrace him. When he finally ascended to the throne, he would echo the very missteps that led to his father's downfall, paving his own path toward a life defined by poverty and obscurity. James returned to England with the restoration of his brother, Charles II, in 1660, ready to reclaim his lost status among the elite of Europe. Handsome, disciplined, and driven, he was honoured with the title Duke of York, along with command of the Royal Navy. To many, he appeared poised for greatness. Yet, James's fortunes, both in politics and finance, were perpetually jeopardized by his unwavering commitment to Catholicism within a predominantly Protestant society. His conversion in the late 1660s further alienated him from political circles, while Parliament, fearful of Catholic influence, curtailed privileges bestowed upon other royals. Even during his brother's reign, James struggled financially. The honourable naval service he offered did not translate into riches. With numerous estates scattered across London and the countryside, the relentless expenses of maintaining his lavish lifestyle outstrip his income. Though Charles II occasionally intervened to assist him, their relationship was strained. James's marriage to Anne Hyde, the powerful Earl of Clarendon's daughter, provided some stability, but her untimely death and subsequent marriage to the Italian Princess Mary of Modena only deepened his alienation from his Protestant subjects and his dependence on foreign allies, especially France. Inheriting not only the crown but also crippling debts upon accession in 1685, James began his reign amid optimism. He was dynamic, purposeful, and astute in governance. However, his zeal to elevate Catholics into positions of authority and to abolish anti-Catholic statutes inflamed discontent. As political strife escalated, financial support from Parliament dwindled to nothing. By 1688, the so-called Glorious Revolution forced him to flee to France, relinquishing his kingdom and much of his wealth. In exile, James faced a daunting reality defined by his dependency on the graciousness of others. King Louis XIV provided refuge at the Château de Saint-Germain, yet this exiled court was little more than a shadow of former splendor. The modest pension and lodging offered by the French monarchy hardly sufficed. James quickly found himself unable to cover household expenses, often relying on the benevolence of sympathizers or selling personal possessions just to meet daily needs. His wife, Mary of Modena, resorted to seeking help from foreign nuns and benefactors to secure education for their children. The remaining years of James's life became a poignant narrative of unfulfilled hopes for restoration. He continued to call himself the legitimate king and gathered a small entourage, but any genuine power had slipped through his fingers. Failed attempts to raise forces in Ireland and Scotland drained his already dwindling resources, and he became a pitiful embodiment of lost glory, maintaining his regal demeanor but increasingly weakened and impoverished. Correspondents from his household repeatedly sought financial assistance from Louis XIV's ministers, with desperate measures such as pawning personal jewels taken to alleviate debts. By the time of his death in 1701, James II had transformed from a political contender of note to a mere exiled figure dependent on a French pension and the charity of a foreign crown. He passed quietly, remembered by few, and was buried in the Church of St. Edmond in Paris, far removed from his homeland. The downfall of James II marks a somber reality about the fragility of royal power built on division and arrogance. His exile served as a poignant metaphor for the void created when authority crumbles, leaving behind echoes of grandeur now reduced to mere memory. His life illustrated a recurring theme throughout history: a royal ousted by political missteps, left to exist on dwindling resources and the goodwill of others. Similarly, the plight of his cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, would starkly reveal the profound costs of powerlessness, encapsulated in captivity and the gradual erosion of wealth and freedom. As a beacon of drama and tragedy, Mary, Queen of Scots, lived a life punctuated by striking contrasts. Crowned a mere 6 days after birth, she quickly became a figure of both adoration and dread, ultimately their victim, fallen amidst the ruthless landscape of politics and betrayal. Yet, amid this tumultuous narrative, a poignant truth often fades into the shadows. In her later years, Mary was grimly cloaked in poverty. Born into a world of splendor, her descent from regal heights to that of a mere prisoner symbolized a struggle to hold onto the remnants of royalty. Stripped of her jewels and estates, Mary found herself reliant on paltry allowances grudgingly doled out by her captors. Born in 1542, her ascent to the Scottish throne commenced before she could even articulate a word. Lavished with education and refinement in France, she married the Dauphin, who later ascended as King Francis II. Her charm and intellect anchored her reputation as one of Europe's most captivating royals. However, Her return to Scotland in 1561 as a grieving widow ignited a long and precarious battle between ambition and survival. The treasure of Scotland was depleted, and her strategic alliances came with a steep price. Her marriage to Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, spiraled into chaos rather than stability. After Darnley's assassination and her ill-fated union with the contentious James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, the spark of rebellion erupted, culminating in her abdication in favour of her infant son, James VI. In 1568, she took the perilous step of crossing into England, pleading for refuge from her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. This gamble, however, unravelled into dire confinement. Ever cautious of Mary's claim to the English crown, Elizabeth ordered her detention for safety. For the next 19 years, Mary would endure the life of a royal captive, maintained with a semblance of dignity but stripped of freedom and financial independence. The demands of even a modest court in captivity weighed heavily. While she insisted on the presence of attendants, her own wealth had faded into nothingness. Her Scottish lands were under her son's authority, and her jewels had been seized by Elizabeth's agents. Mary's frantic letters unveiled her constant anxiety about finances. Overwhelmed by expenses, she often beseeched Elizabeth and her European relatives for funds to support her household. Disturbingly, her captors would frequently deduct costs for her guards directly from her meagre funds, rendering her nearly destitute. Each relocation, from Carlisle to Bolton, and finally to Fotheringhay, demanded upkeep, but as her resources dwindled, the surroundings grew increasingly barren. Desperate, she resorted to selling or pawning personal belongings for wages, her letters increasingly tinged with despair. "I am a queen without a realm," she lamented in her correspondence, a poignant reflection of her plight. Despite her dire situation, Mary maintained her regal composure. She adorned herself elegantly when she could, composed music, and corresponded with foreign courts. Yet these small acts of dignity came at a severe cost. Though her imprisonment offered physical shelter, it exacted a profound psychological toll and a devastating financial decline. By the time her life was extinguished in 1587, her possessions had been distilled to what she could privately carry. Her final will mirrored her fate, as she left tokens to her servants while entreating for her debts to be settled, knowing well that many would remain unpaid. Mary's final hours present a haunting tableau, poised and dignified in borrowed attire, a testament to both her spirit and her untold poverty. The narrative of Mary, Queen of Scots, encapsulates the tragic journey of a sovereign condemned to experience both political and financial desolation. She began her existence cloaked in opulence but concluded it within the confines of cold stone walls, devoid of all but her dignity. As she found her final rest, a new royal future loomed, one that would echo her own crisis. King Charles I, her descendant, destined to grapple with the chaotic forces of faith and power that would lead to another tumultuous downfall. Charles I of England remains one of history's most tragic figures, a monarch whose unwavering belief in divine right led to a catastrophic clash with the desires of his subjects. His reign was marked not only by civil strife and execution, but also by a financial calamity that mirrored the turmoil of his rule. Despite his regal composure and intellectual depth, Charles lacked the acumen to manage his finances wisely. His tale reveals a complex portrait of how pride, extravagant tastes, and inflexible politics can drive a king from opulence to desolation. Ascending the throne in 1625, Charles inherited not just a crown but a legacy fraught with fiscal instability stemming from his father, James I. The Stuart monarchy was already reeling under the strains of warfare, rising inflation, and the exorbitant costs associated with maintaining a royal image that could rival the grandeur on the continent. Firm in his belief that his authority was divinely ordained, Charles shunned the necessity of parliamentary consent, which made him both inflexible and dangerously self-reliant financially. From the outset, his lavish spending reflected that of European nobility. A passionate admirer of the arts, he amassed breathtaking works by Titian, Rubens, and Van Dyck, creating one of the most esteemed royal art collections in Europe. He transformed royal residences like Whitehall and Hampton Court, enlisting renowned architects, projects that, while enriching royal culture, wreaked havoc on the treasury. Parliament, concerned by Charles's affiliations with Catholicism and foreign powers, continually resisted granting him sufficient tax revenue. In retaliation, Charles resorted to increasingly draconian measures to finance his ambitions, imposing forced loans on the wealthy and reviving outdated feudal dues. His controversial collection of ship money, originally designed for coastal defense, was scandalously extended inland, alienating nobles and commoners alike. Even some proponents of the monarchy grew wary of his perceived extortion. Meanwhile, his military campaigns against Spain and later France depleted his already fragile finances, leading to disastrous outcomes and mutinies among unpaid soldiers. As discontent brewed, news of the escalating debt within the royal household began to surface. Creditors voiced their grievances, and foreign ambassadors reported that the British king was living beyond his means. Despite the court's facade of splendor, the financial decay intensified, even prompting complaints from his wife, Queen Henrietta Maria, about the unsustainable expenditures. By 1640, when Charles finally had to reconvene Parliament to secure funding for his war in Scotland, he faced an empty treasury and dwindling political clout. The looming civil war laid bare the hollowness of his financial system. The king's forces found themselves grappling for supplies while the parliamentary army thrived on better funding and organization. As defeat drew closer, Charles was compelled to sell his personal possessions, including jewelry, silverware, and tapestries, to support his cause. The royal household diminished, loyal servants went unpaid, and the once lavish banquets transformed into scenes of austerity. Captured in 1647, Charles faced staggering debts. The victorious Parliament seized his estates and sold vast portions of his property, including the treasured art collection that had been the pride of his reign, now auctioned to foreign buyers to offset war expenses. By the time of his trial in 1649, Charles was not only politically defeated but also materially impoverished, a monarch stripped of his throne, wealth, and dignity. In his final moments, Charles penned reflections on faith and justice, yet the depth of his material ruin was inescapable. He had lived as if wealth were boundless, only to die a man whose crown had dissolved into debt and whose fortune had vanished. His downfall serves as a stark reminder that monarchy cannot endure without economic strength. Stubbornness turned fiscal pressure into national disaster, and when his reign unraveled, even Queen Henrietta Maria faced the spectre of financial ruin, an exiled widow seeking survival through charity after the revolution sparked by her husband's debts. In the story of Queen Henrietta Maria, wife of Charles I, we uncover a stark narrative of royal downfall and survival. Once a captivating French princess who enlivened the English court, her life took a turn toward obscurity and hardship following her husband's bloody reign, marred by financial ruin. Born in 1609 as the youngest daughter of King Henry IV of France and Marie de Medici, her union with Charles I in 1625 was seen as a bond of alliance between England and France. Arriving in London, she embodied both charm and controversy as a devout Catholic queen in a predominantly Protestant landscape. Over time, despite initial resistance due to her faith and foreign entourage, her intelligence won over many, allowing her to become a trusted advisor to Charles. Together, they cultivated a court vibrant with artistic expression. Music, painting, and theatre thrived under their patronage. However, this cultural brilliance masked precarious finances. As civil conflict erupted in 1642, Henrietta threw herself into supporting the monarchy, selling her jewels for military funding and arranging clandestine shipments of gold and weapons. Yet, her valiant efforts only aggravated her precarious condition. Ships were often waylaid, and loans incurred heavy interest, leading her to flee England in 1644, leaving most possessions and some children behind. Exiled in France, Henrietta experienced the swift decline of royal privilege firsthand. Despite her connections, being the sister of the reigning French queen and aunt to the future Louis XIV, she found her support scant. Her income was irregular and insufficient, forcing her into modest living conditions, often relying on the generosity of noble relatives. Her correspondence from this period reveals a constant struggle with financial insecurity, with appeals for funds and worries about her children's futures. The execution of her husband in 1649 deepened her plight, as the royal estates were confiscated, leaving her without income. Her surviving children were scattered, some in exile, others imprisoned, casting a shadow of grief around her. When the monarchy was restored in 1660 with the accession of her son Charles II, she returned to England, but the welcome was tepid. Her influence had faded, and her son's finances were too strained to assist her meaningfully. Disillusioned, she returned to France, where she settled into obscurity, living with reduced means and surrounded by memories of a past filled with grandeur. Henrietta maintained an air of dignity despite her circumstances, relying on a meagre pension and selling personal items through intermediaries to meet her needs. Witnesses describe her living quarters as sparse and her meals simple, a far cry from the opulence she once knew. When she passed away in 1669 at the age of 60, she was almost forgotten, buried in St. Denis rather than Westminster beside her husband, a poignant symbol of her exile from the nation she had once captivated. Her life encapsulates the fragile nature of royal existence, highlighting how majesty can yield to vulnerability. Charles I fell to war, and Henrietta's fortune dwindled under the weight of survival. Together, they exemplify the delicate balance between glamour and fragility, revealing that royal splendor is often held together by the precarious threads of politics and finance. As England's monarchy began anew under Charles II, their legacy lingered, a testament to the burdens of royalty, illuminated by the ambitious yet often thwarted spirit of figures like Prince Rupert of the Rhine, who would grapple with the shadows of debt and disappointment that loom large over royal ambitions. Prince Rupert of the Rhine, a tragic royal legacy. Prince Rupert of the Rhine, the nephew of King Charles II, stands as a striking figure of the dashing royal cavalier, a symbol of bravery and charisma that still ignites the imaginations of many. Renowned for his gallant charges and audacious naval battles, Rupert's larger-than-life persona often obscures the harsh realities of his later life. Beneath that romanticized facade lay a man ravaged by war, beset by misfortune, and crippled by relentless debt. By his life's end, this once commanding prince, who had led armies and fleets, was reduced to trading and speculating, scavenging for mere survival like an ordinary merchant. Born in 1619 at Prague Castle to Frederick V, the Elector Palatine, and Elizabeth Stuart, the daughter of King James I of England, Rupert's royal lineage was marred by adversity. His family's fall from grace began with Frederick's brief reign as the Winter King of Bohemia, cut short by defeat that plunged them into exile and poverty. His earliest memories were not filled with the grandeur of palaces, but rather with the stark uncertainty of wandering courts and financial struggles. His mother often relied on the charity of relatives, teaching Rupert a painful lesson about the fragility of royal privilege, a lesson that would shape his outlook forever. When the English Civil War erupted, the young Rupert joined his uncle, Charles I, with unwavering loyalty. His natural flair and tactical brilliance quickly elevated him to the status of the most celebrated royalist leader. Known for his daring cavalry maneuvers, he earned the moniker Rupert the Devil. For a fleeting moment, the prospect of victory seemed within reach. However, triumph did not equate to riches. The royalist forces continuously grappled with lack of funds, subsisting on plunder and loans. Rupert even contributed his own meagre resources, pawning belongings to equip his soldiers. Following the royalists' defeat, he faced disdain from Parliament, lost his command, and found himself exiled once more. The subsequent years transformed Rupert from a fierce warrior into a wandering mercenary across Europe. His military exploits in France and the Holy Roman Empire were sporadic, with payment often delayed or absent. Even the spoils of war seemed to vanish through mismanagement and theft. When his cousin, Charles II, was restored to the throne in 1660, Rupert's financial situation was dire, though his reputation endured. The restoration afforded him a moment of recognition as he was appointed Admiral of the Navy, where his strategic acumen during the Anglo-Dutch Wars proved vital. Yet, even this newfound role offered little financial security. The Navy was underfunded, and Rupert often found himself covering expenses from his own finances. In his later years, Rupert ventured into commerce and science, seeking a means of independence. He became one of the initial investors in the Hudson's Bay Company, a pioneering trading venture that ultimately flourished after his passing. His explorations into metallurgy and chemistry yielded innovative discoveries, showcasing his restless intellect and ambition to rise above his royal limitations. Yet, despite these creative pursuits, the tangible rewards remained elusive. His income continued to fluctuate, and creditors relentlessly pursued him. Rupert ultimately lived a modest life in England, far removed from the opulence of his youth. He maintained a measure of respect and affection for his courage and brilliance, yet he also stood as a relic, a knightly figure adrift in a rapidly evolving world where trade, not chivalry, defined success. He passed away in 1682, reportedly leaving behind significant debts and little of value. His estate could only be settled with royal aid, a quiet reminder that even a prince who served his country loyally could be ensnared by the relentless cycle of financial insolvency. Prince Rupert's life vividly illustrates the contradictions inherent in 17th century royalty. He possessed the virtues revered by tales of old: bravery, loyalty, and vision. Yet he lacked the financial foundation necessary for lasting security. His life was one of heroism, ending with honor but devoid of comfort. His legacy echoes through the legends, yet his fortunes did not. As Rupert's struggles for solvency concluded, the royal family's enduring dance with debt persisted into the next era, where the financial follies of his and Charles's lineage would resurface, embodied in a royal descendant whose own recklessness would plunge her family into ridicule and ruin. Princess Charlotte, the Duchess of Valentino, is a name that hails from the lesser-known branches of Britain's royal lineage. As a granddaughter of King Edward III, she serves as a poignant testament to the fleeting nature of privilege, exemplifying how even those born into affluence can find themselves engulfed in adversity due to extravagance and poor choices. Her story, unlike the tumultuous tales of rebellion or exile, unfolds as a slow and painful descent into financial ruin. Born in 1898, Charlotte Louise Juliette Grimaldi emerged as the child of Louis II, Prince of Monaco, and Lady Mary Victoria Hamilton, a distant relation of Queen Victoria. She was strategically positioned between British nobility and continental aristocracy, brought up amidst the opulence of the Belle Epoque, a time rich in glamour and creativity. Yet, Monaco during her youth was not yet the glimmering jewel it would become. Its economy hinged precariously on gambling and the favor of European elites. She spent her formative years detached from her father's small principality, flitting between France and Switzerland. The turning point in Charlotte's life came in 1919 when she was officially recognized as her father's rightful heir during a tumultuous period for the Grimaldi dynasty. Embracing her royal role, she quickly became a darling of high society and charmed many with her grace. However, her penchant for luxury spiraled out of control. In 1920, her marriage to Count Pierre d'Alina was expected to fortify both her social standing and family's finances, yet it brought neither stability nor happiness. Their union bore 2 children, including Rainier III, but was marked by discontent, leading to their separation in the 1930s. As Charlotte began living on her own, she maintained multiple grand residences in France and Italy, overflowing with art and fine furnishings. These homes turned into emblems of her high taste amid mounting debts. By midlife, the financial strain became apparent, as her substantial inheritance dwindled alongside the costs of her lavish lifestyle. The Great Depression worsened her yields, and the approaching clouds of World War II further jeopardized her finances. Instead of scaling back, she persisted in maintaining her opulent facade, selling jewels and artworks to support her extravagant way of life. When war erupted, she sought refuge in the French countryside, yet her resources rapidly dwindled. Following World War II, Charlotte's relationship with her son Rainier became crucial as Monaco began to transform under his direction into a sanctuary for the affluent. However, the era of luxuries had eluded Charlotte. In 1944, she formally renounced her claim to the throne, making way for Rainier in exchange for a modest financial settlement that fell far short of her once grand fortune. In her later years, she found solace at the Château de Mer in northern France, living a quiet life with just a few attendants. Descriptions from friends paint her as both proud and solitary, unwilling to confront her diminished circumstances. By the time of her death in 1977, Charlotte's estate had diminished significantly, the result of years of unbridled spending. The tale of Princess Charlotte is an emblematic narrative that amounts to a reflection on the shifting dynamics of royal privilege throughout the 20th century. Her downfall wasn't the product of war or controversy. Rather, it stemmed from an inability to adapt to changing times. In an age where noble titles no longer ensured wealth, Charlotte clung to the ways of a bygone era when royal status could sustain itself on reputation alone. Ironically, her decline mirrored the actions of her illustrious ancestor King James I of England and VI of Scotland, who had also driven himself into debt through extravagant patronage and an extravagant vision of his reign. Both stories resonate as a striking caution against the perils of excess and mismanagement amidst the relentless march of time. King James I, known as the VI of Scotland, was a sovereign whose brilliance and literary passion belied his turbulent relationship with finances. His reign symbolized the merging of England and Scotland under a singular crown but was marred by a relentless battle against debt. Despite ruling over a wealthy realm, James's life ended littered with financial obligations that his heirs would inevitably face. His vast intellect did not translate into economic prudence. He viewed his lavish spending not as reckless, but as a royal prerogative manifesting divine majesty. Born in 1566, James was thrust into monarchy as an infant after his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots, was forced to step down. Growing up amidst the chaos of Scotland's disarray and weakened treasury set the stage for his subsequent decisions. Once King of England in 1603, succeeding Elizabeth I, he anticipated better fiscal fortunes. Yet, in a mere few years, his expenditures eclipsed those of his predecessor. Generosity became both his greatest asset and his undoing. Lavishing titles, estates, and pensions on favourites such as Robert Carr and George Villiers, James's lavish gifts were interpreted by commoners as excessive. The ongoing battle with Parliament over fiscal limits characterised his reign, where efforts to impose restrictions were met with fierce denial from a king who firmly believed in the divine right to rule. When finances dwindled, as they frequently did, he resorted to selling royal lands, creating a temporary relief but guaranteeing long-term instability. His monopolies on daily goods incited public outrage, increasing dissatisfaction with the monarchy. Despite his crippling debts, James's interests extended beyond the monetary realm. He championed the creation of the King James Bible, a monumental literary work, and indulged in elaborate court spectacles to project an image of power and unity. Yet, these extravagant displays drained the treasury at an alarming rate. Come the 1610s, the financial crisis escalated. Sky-high wardrobe expenses burdened his household, servants went unpaid, and creditors loomed ominously. Political inflexibility hindered reforms, compounding his dilemmas. Tragedy struck with the deaths of his son, Prince Henry, in 1612, and Queen in 1619, further deteriorating both his health and finances. Seeking solace in intellectual pursuits did little to mend the kingdom's financial distress. By his death in 1625, James found himself deep in debt to London bankers and other suppliers, leaving his son, Charles I, to inherit a crown overshadowed by a fiscal calamity that would feed into civil war. James sought to embody the philosopher-king ideal, intending to govern with reason and sagacity, yet his financial imprudence exposed the monarchy's susceptibility to ruin. His extravagant lifestyle eroded regal authority and bred distrust with Parliament. Ultimately, the Scholar King's reign, having begun with the promise of unity, concluded with a divided legacy and an empty treasury, foreshadowing future monarchs who would grapple with similar pitfalls of opulence and debt, such as his descendant, Prince George, Duke of Kent. Prince George, Duke of Kent, stands as one of the most captivating yet complex figures in the tapestry of the British royal family. Born the fifth son of King George V and Queen Mary in 1902, he navigated a world filled with privilege and societal grace, yet his life would ultimately be marred by financial turmoil, scandal, and tragedy. As the younger brother to Kings Edward VIII and George VI, George flourished in an era when the monarchy was being reshaped by the allure of cinema, the excitement of automobiles, and the glitter of celebrity culture. From the outset, he was steeped in the rigid formality of Edwardian royalty, an environment defined by duty and hierarchy. Yet, as the 20th century unfolded, Prince George became emblematic of a newly emerging aristocracy that embraced modern indulgence while retaining royal titles. His education was impressive. He was multilingual and well regarded for his charm and good looks, capturing the hearts of society through the lens of eager photographers. Throughout the Roaring Twenties and the following decade, he emerged as a symbol of contemporary nobility, effortlessly stylish and cosmopolitan. However, this aura of sophistication came at a steep cost. George's appetite for extravagance, fast cars, high-end travel, art, and fashion rapidly spiraled out of control. He immersed himself in London's vibrant social scene, frequenting exclusive gatherings that drained both his resources and his reputation. Unlike his more austere brothers, he had little taste for frugality. His attraction to the avant-garde drew him into circles filled with artists and writers known for their flamboyant lifestyles, including luminaries like Noel Coward and Cecil Beaton. Yet, Prince George's financial landscape was akin to a tightrope walk. Despite receiving a royal stipend and living a life of privilege, his expenses skyrocketed, often leading him to rely on loans from friends or to discreetly sell off personal treasures to settle debts. He amassed costly properties and art without a thought for future implications. His legendary penchant for travel, particularly along the luxurious Riviera, became a significant financial burden. His marriage in 1934 to the elegant Princess Marina of Greece didn't curb his extravagant lifestyle. Rather, their joint sumptuousness placed further strain on their finances. The turbulent 1930s intensified the scrutiny on his extravagant take on life, especially after the abdication crisis involving his brother, Edward VIII. While George VI worked tirelessly to regain stability, the Duke's lavish lifestyle continued to attract critical attention, with palace officials wary of the implications. Even his military and diplomatic appointments, from the Foreign Office to the Royal Air Force, did little to alleviate his financial woes. Behind closed doors, royal advisers counseled a more modest approach, yet shedding his luxurious tastes proved challenging. As World War II loomed on the horizon, George's debts had reached a threshold of concern for Buckingham Palace. Interventions from his mother, Queen Mary, aimed to restore financial order, but even amidst ongoing conflict, he maintained an exterior of charm and elegance. Tragedy struck in 1942 when Prince George was tragically killed in an air crash at just 39. The shockwave from his sudden loss revealed a tangled web of financial chaos, with significant debts and outstanding bills coming to light. His widow, Princess Marina, confronted the daunting task of upholding royal standards despite diminished resources, while the consequences of George's reckless spending remained a subdued embarrassment for the monarchy. Prince George's life serves as a poignant narrative of modern royalty's contradictions, enveloped in wealth yet often short on funds, admired publicly yet battling personal insecurities. His legacy, oscillating between charm and extravagance, reveals a struggle to maintain an image of sophistication amidst financial decline. A reflection of his time, George embodies interwar elegance married with instability, a stark reminder that the patterns of excess he personified would soon echo through the life of his younger brother. Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester, who too would find his fortunes slipping away under the weight of royal expectations and precarious investments. Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester, embarked on a life marked by quiet duty, distinct from the flamboyant escapades of many royal relatives. The third son of King George V and Queen Mary, he represented a bygone era, characterized by discipline and unwavering loyalty to duty. In stark contrast to his more notorious brothers, Edward VIII, who famously abdicated, and George, Duke of Kent, known for his lavish lifestyle, Henry managed to sidestep scandal. However, he could not evade the financial strain that loomed over 20th century royalty, being a prince without a throne. Born in 1900, Henry's upbringing coincided with the twilight of the British Empire, a time when noble titles still commanded global respect. From his early years, he was instilled with a sense of responsibility that prioritized duty over opulence. His education at Eton and Sandhurst paved the way for a distinguished military career, where he earned a reputation for reliability. Yet that very discipline also led to a later struggle. He was expected to live up to royal standards while lacking the wealth and power historically associated with his lineage. In 1935, he married Lady Alice Montague Douglas Scott, a union that, while genuine, reflected the post-Great Depression era's austerity. Their wedding, modest by royal standards, signified a preference for simplicity. However, even maintaining their official residences came with hefty expenses, requiring upkeep and a dedicated staff. Henry's income sources, primarily a parliamentary allowance and military wages, fell woefully short of the costs associated with royal life. During World War II, the Duke took on significant roles, serving as chief liaison with the British Expeditionary Force in France and later as Governor-General of Australia, 1945 to 1947. This distinguished post further strained his finances with the demands of royal representation abroad. Entertaining dignitaries and hosting official functions came at a steep personal cost. Although some government funding was available, Henry often shouldered additional expenses to avoid any semblance of neglecting his royal duties. Upon his return to Britain, he discovered a shifting royal landscape. While the monarchy remained popular, The economic challenges of the post-war era began to take their toll. Unlike the sovereign, Henry lacked valuable estates that could generate substantial revenue. His investments, primarily in lands and bonds, faltered amid post-war inflation, compelling him and Alice to sell off minor assets and cherished heirlooms to manage expenses. Despite these financial hurdles, Henry upheld his royal responsibilities with dignity, attending events and championing numerous charities. However, the burdens of financial constraint became increasingly evident as the years passed. Their beloved Barnwell Manor proved difficult to maintain, leading the couple to ultimately move to Kensington Palace, leasing Barnwell out to tenants to mitigate costs. By the time of Henry's passing in 1974, his estate was modest relative to royal standards, with most assets bequeathed to Princess Alice, who lived into her second century, bearing her own financial challenges. To support herself, she was eventually forced to part with personal treasures collected over a lifetime of service. The later years of the Gloucesters unveiled a seldom-seen reality. Within royal walls, financial strain could be palpable, and the call of duty often exacted a steeper price than it returned. Prince Henry's life may lack the notorious scandal associated with his siblings, but it encapsulates a more somber aspect of royal existence. Those who adhered to duty, maintaining decorum, witnessed their fortunes wane. His battle was not against public scandal, but rather against the unyielding arithmetic of maintaining royal status in a changing world. The challenges he faced foreshadowed the continuing theme of royal financial instability, a legacy that traces back to his ancestor, William Henry, Duke of Clarence, who, despite his own reckless lifestyle, ultimately ascended the throne as King William IV. In the realm of royal history, few tales are as intriguing as that of Prince William Henry, Duke of Clarence, who would later reign as King William IV. Before his unexpected elevation to the throne in 1830, William was a figure marked by financial struggles and indulgent habits. The third son of George III, he was never meant to wear the crown. His formative years flowed with the carefree spirit of a younger prince, unburdened by responsibility and rich in freedom. His engaging personality and nautical ambitions earned him the endearing title of the Sailor King, yet beneath his affable exterior lay years of fiscal mismanagement. Born in 1765, William's journey commenced in the Royal Navy at a mere 13, a backdrop that indelibly shaped his character, imbuing him with blunt courage and a fondness for the bonds formed at sea. Yet, the steady naval salary was hardly adequate for a prince nurtured in opulence. As a young officer, he quickly developed a penchant for lavish spending, hearty drinking, and entertaining, draining his resources long before adulthood. Upon his return to England, William eagerly dove into the glitz of London society, mirroring his elder siblings' pursuits of theatre, gambling, and lavish affairs. However, lacking their political clout or financial acumen, William found himself ensnared by relentless debts, his parliamentary allowance devoured by an extravagant lifestyle. By his 30s, he was grappling with an ever-growing list of creditors, but his most consequential relationship was with actress Dorothea Jordan. For 2 decades, they lived together, welcoming 10 children, all proudly bearing the surname Fitzclarence. His affection for Dorothea and their brood was clear. Yet the financial ramifications of this large family weighed heavily on him. He endeavoured to support them all, providing a comfortable life at Bushy House, even as parliamentary support dwindled. Desperate times drove William to borrow extensively, with creditors knocking at his door, forcing him into humiliating situations where he had to beg for financial relief. In 1818, after enduring a tumultuous period of debt and instability, William chose a pragmatic path. He married the sensible Princess Adelaide of Saxe-Meiningen, hoping to restore some semblance of respectability. Her modest dowry offered a brief respite, and her frugal nature initiated a measure of financial discipline in his life. Their relationship, a bright spot in his historical narrative, was stable and warm, yet the shadows of past debts loomed large, complicating their lives with the continuing costs of his offspring and estates. As the late 1820s approached, fortune began to smile upon William. He inherited property from relatives and saw a fraction of his debts alleviated through government assistance. Then, fate took a dramatic turn. The death of his brother, George IV, struck like lightning, thrusting William into the role of monarch. The sailor king, laden with a lifetime of struggles, became king of the United Kingdom. To the surprise of many, his years of hardship reformed him. He became astute and budget-conscious, slashing court spending and paring down staff, exhibiting a refreshing candor that won him respect. Yet even as king, the scars of his earlier life never wholly faded. Many of his assets were still tied to past obligations, and his inherent generosity left him grappling with financial complexities. When he passed away in 1837, his accounts balanced, albeit modestly. Unlike his brother, he left no grand legacy of opulence, just a commendable reputation for integrity. William's evolution from reckless prince to prudent king stands as a poignant reminder in royal annals, a tale of excess gone awry and the vital lesson that even those born to privilege must reckon with the costs of their desires. Though his reign hinted at a resolution to financial discord, the patterns would soon re-emerge, as his nephew, Edward VII, born to an age overflowing with new opportunities, would inherit the same love for luxury and high living that had so nearly engulfed the sailor king. In the annals of royal history, few figures stand out as prominently as Edward VII in his early years as the Prince of Wales, a man affectionately dubbed Bertie by those close to him. Long before he ascended the throne, he became notorious for his lavish lifestyle, a true reflection of the contradictions of Victorian high society. Charming and extravagant, yet perpetually in debt and consistently flirting with scandal, he was a source of both despair for his mother, Queen Victoria, and adoration from his circle of friends. For nearly 6 decades, Edward existed in a world of opulence, plagued by a relentless financial burden, a rare heir who found it challenging to live within the confines of his own means. Born in 1841 as the first son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, Bertie's upbringing was governed by strict discipline. His parents aimed to forge him into the model constitutional monarch, but he rebelled, gravitating toward a life of entertainment rather than duty. As he matured, his reputation for charm expanded, yet so did his insatiable desire for luxury. His fondness for gourmet food, horse racing, gambling, and high-priced fashion soon became the stuff of legend. Though he received a substantial income, it was never sufficient to sustain his indulgent lifestyle. After marrying Princess Alexandra of Denmark in 1863, Bertie received an allowance from Parliament and income from the Duchy of Cornwall. Yet, spiralling debts quickly became a constant companion. At Marlborough House in Sandringham, his life was a continuous spectacle of extravagant dinners, grand balls, and thrilling sporting events. With an insatiable love for horse racing and a stable filled with thoroughbreds, he found himself spending vast sums on racing wagers and card games. His penchant for fashion was equally costly, with a notorious habit of acquiring new suits, hardly ever wearing the same outfit twice. But beneath the flamboyant persona lay a more complex motivation. Edward believed himself to be the vital link between the monarchy and its subjects, tasked with ensuring the loyalty of the aristocracy and keeping the upper classes entertained. His soirees and hunting parties were crucial for bolstering royal presence during a time when the monarchy was evolving from political power to a more symbolic role. However, these public displays of charm masked a personal financial disaster. By the 1870s, he was leaning on friends and bankers to keep his household afloat, a situation that horrified Queen Victoria, who deemed his behavior both frivolous and undignified. There were desperate attempts to curb his spending, but Bertie's charm and popularity with the public provided a protective veil over his reckless expenditures. As he approached middle age, his debts became staggering, estimated at several £1,000,000 in today's currency. His cherished Sandringham estate transformed into a financial burden, consumed by lavish renovations, extravagant hunting parties, and an ever-growing guest list. Despite the alarming toll on his finances, Bertie remained resolute in his commitment to hospitality, believing it was a royal obligation to uphold appearances. Encompassed by some of the era's wealthiest individuals, bankers, industrialists, and aristocrats, he was often granted credit fueled either by loyalty or ambition. Yet, murmurs regarding his excessive borrowing began to circulate. When Edward finally ascended the throne in 1901, the financial landscape shifted slightly in his favour, gift-wrapped in the more stable support of the Crown estate. However, the habits of a lifetime are not easily discarded. His coronation alone demanded a staggering outlay on attires, celebrations, and official events. Unease lingered among his advisers, foreseeing a potential return to financial chaos. Yet, Edward's innate ability to connect with the public allowed him to maintain affection, portraying a modern, accessible monarchy. Yet behind the charisma was a prince who had lived a life precariously financed on credit, caught in the delicate dance between royal image and personal excess. His time as Prince of Wales paints a vivid portrait of a man born unto wealth yet shadowed by debt, celebrated for his elegance yet criticized for his extravagance. Upon his demise in 1910, the crown passed to his son George V, who inherited not just the throne but also the enduring spectre of financial turbulence that had shadowed their lineage. Unlike his father, George would adopt a frugal lifestyle and lead with discipline, yet he too would navigate the challenging waters of royal finance, illustrating the dichotomy of opulence and restraint that has plagued royal fortunes through the ages. The saga of the monarchy and financial prudence continued, threaded through the legacy of George III, a ruler marked by both thrift and turmoil. In the chronicles of history, King George III looms large, remembered primarily for his lengthy reign, his mental struggles, and his tumultuous relations with the American colonies. Yet, beneath the grand narratives of politics and personal decline lies an often overshadowed truth, a life fraught with constant financial distress. Frequently caricatured as Farmer George for his seemingly simple lifestyle, he was a monarch ensnared in a relentless battle with accumulating debts, both personal and inherited. Ascending to the throne in 1760 at just 22 years old, George inherited an empire embroiled in conflict and a legacy of financial mismanagement. The Hanoverian lineage he belonged to was rarely characterized by prudence. His grandfather, George II, had maintained an extravagant court, and his father, Frederick, Prince of Wales, left a significant debt upon his death. George's initial decree was to hand over the Crown estate to Parliament in exchange for a civil list, an annual payment that ultimately shifted the relationship between the monarchy and England's fiscal health. This arrangement was designed for stability, yet as years passed, even this generous endowment became insufficient. George embarked on his reign with ideals of moral probity and devotion to family life, shunning the lavish distractions of his predecessors. His interests lay in music, agriculture, and science, fields he passionately pursued, albeit at great cost. The upkeep of multiple royal residences and his pursuit of agricultural advancements drained royal coffers, viewed as essential investments from the king's perspective but perceived as financial pitfalls by his treasurers. The early years of his marriage to Queen Charlotte were affluent, but as their family expanded to 15 children, expenses spiraled. The costs of education, dowries, and living expenses for a growing royal household surged. By the late 1780s, although Parliament provided funding, cash flow issues plagued the royal residence. The American War of Independence further strained Britain's finances, and public sentiment towards the monarchy soured, with critics accusing the king of squandering taxpayer money to line his family's pockets. Adding to this, George's firstborn, the future George IV, was notorious for lavish spending, sinking the family deeper into financial turmoil, requiring parliamentary bailouts that George reluctantly sanctioned. His attempts to instill financial discipline in his son only deepened familial strife. The financial strain worsened into the 1790s as revolutionary France drew Britain into costly conflicts. Despite George's reputed frugality, reusing candles and mending old coats, his household costs accrued in ways no royal budget could support. By 1800, the civil list faced a shortfall, prompting government intervention to avoid scandal. As George's health declined, the heavy burden of financial stewardship fell increasingly on Queen Charlotte and court officials, who strived to maintain appearances amid growing costs. The poignant image of the aging, blind king wandering the halls of Windsor Castle masked a sobering reality. The monarch who once presided over a vast empire found himself reliant on judicious budgeting and parliamentary generosity to sustain his household. Upon his death in 1820, George III left behind not wealth, but a legacy marked by financial inconsistencies, a tale of frugal aspirations undermined by the inevitable demands of monarchy. In public perception, he remained a paragon of virtue, yet privately he was embroiled in a continual struggle for financial stability. His reign exemplified the tension between the ideals of royal thriftiness and the unyielding costs associated with the monarchy, setting the stage for subsequent generations. As the 18th century gave way to the early 19th, this delicate balance would challenge his descendants, including Queen Anne, who too would find the interplay of health, politics, and finances to be a formidable trial, revealing that even crowned heads could falter under the weight of regal expense. Queen Anne, reigning from 1702 to 1714, is often remembered for uniting England and Scotland and for an era rich in cultural development. Yet, beneath the constitutional achievements, there lay a queen beset by constant financial strain. Balancing her own frugality against the immense costs of maintaining royal dignity in a time of war, and inherited a troubled monarchy grappling with debt and political chaos. Born in 1665 to James II and Hyde, her early years were steeped in religious conflict and royal extravagance. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 left her in a precarious position, living off a modest allowance and borrowing from friends to sustain her household. Assuming the throne in 1702 brought in financial control, yet she bore the heavy burden of war costs stemming from the War of the Spanish Succession. She allocated significant funds for military efforts, diplomatic measures, and generous entertainment for her allies, but Parliament kept her budget restrained, mindful of the royal powers her grandfather and father had wielded. Despite her crown, and struggled to manage public finances, often pushing her requests for additional funds toward Parliament, which used this to challenge her. Her personal relationships, particularly with Sarah Churchill, the Duchess of Marlborough, added complexity to her monetary woes. While their friendship began vibrant, it soured, and financial mismanagement ensued. As Anne's health deteriorated, suffering from gout and obesity, her expenses on medical care and multiple residences mounted. Even her fervent support for the Church of England drew upon her private funds, as she contributed to church repairs and clerical salaries. Anne's genuine frugality stood in stark contrast to the requirements of her role, as she was expected to display grandeur and opulence. Over her reign, her financial affairs spiraled into disorder, leading to unpaid servants and alarming parliamentary debates about her spending. Eventually, upon her death in 1714, Anne left behind no wealth for her heirs, as her possessions were sold off to settle debts. Her life epitomizes the contradictions of early constitutional monarchy, a powerful queen restrained by the very governance she led. Defying the lavish expectations of royalty, she was the first modern monarch faced with the realities of fiscal accountability. Her reign concluded with financial strain, setting the stage for future royal challenges, particularly for her successors, such as Bonnie Prince Charlie, who would face their own struggles of poverty and exile, shaped by the legacy of her tumultuous reign. Prince Charles Edward Stuart, better known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, stands as a poignant figure in the annals of monarchy, embodying both the allure and the downfall that often accompany royal lineage. His saga, rich with rebellion, exile, and the echoes of lost grandeur, has been immortalized in songs and folklore, frequently through a nostalgic lens. Yet, beneath the charismatic facade of this dashing young prince lies a far more somber reality. His existence was marked by poverty, dependence, and disillusionment, transforming him from a would-be monarch into a wanderer surviving on the margins of life. Born in Rome in 1720, Charles was the grandson of the ousted King James II of England and Scotland, who had been dethroned during the Glorious Revolution of 1688. Growing up in exile, he was constantly reminded of former greatness, the faded glory of the Stuart court, unwavering loyalty from Jacobite supporters, and the steadfast hope of reclaiming the British throne. Despite his education being steeped in chivalric ideals and Catholic faith, nothing could prepare him for the harsh political nuances of 18th century Europe or the financial instabilities that would pervade his existence. In 1745, believing fervently in his fate, Charles landed in Scotland with limited French support to lead a rebellion aimed at restoring his father, James Francis Edward Stuart, to power. He managed to rally the Highland clans, marching astoundingly south to Derby, igniting hope among the exiled Stuarts. Yet, the ambitious uprising was thwarted by glaring shortages and disunity, culminating in a catastrophic defeat at Culloden in 1746. Fleeing for his life through the Scottish Highlands, his desperate escape, aided by loyal allies such as Flora MacDonald, became legendary. However, the ensuing years unveiled a stark departure from romantic myth. Charles traversed Europe, France, Italy, the Papal States, navigating a life devoid of the financial security he desperately needed. Once reliant on French backing, he faced dwindling resources and a lack of official support due to British pressures. Stripped of his titles, he became economically precarious, selling jewels and borrowing heavily while residing in humble accommodations that belied his royal aspirations. As he entered middle age, his fortunes diminished further. The once vibrant Jacobite cause faded, his health faltered, and bitterness set in, transforming him from a beloved figure into a recluse, increasingly alienated from his devoted followers. Attempts to regain wealth through investments proved futile, leaving him reliant on the kindness of relatives and compassionate kings. His marriage in 1772 to the much younger Princess Louise of Stolbeck was pragmatic and offered no escape from financial hardship, subsequently unraveling amid turmoil and jealousy. By the time of his death in 1788, Charles was a shadow of his former self, living a quiet life in Florence and largely forgotten by the society that once idolized him. The young hero who had led armies was now reduced to a few rented rooms, accompanied only by unpaid servants and remnants of dreams long extinguished. His burial in Rome, while dignified, was modest, sustained by distant kin. The life of Prince Charles Edward Stuart embodies the tragedy of royal exile, noble lineage yet devoid of power, a title without substance, and a fate swallowed by nostalgia. His descent into obscurity paints a vivid portrait of the Stuart dynasty's long fall. As the Jacobite aspiration turned to legend, another royal woman was poised to navigate her own struggles within the very framework of royalty, a contrast to Charles but not exempt from the quiet trials of royal life. Princess Louise, Duchess of Argyll, offspring of Queen Victoria, discovered that a royal birth doesn't always ensure lasting comfort, even amid the opulence of the Victorian era. Princess Louise, the Duchess of Argyll and daughter of Queen Victoria, stands out among her siblings as a spirit too independent for the confines of royalty. Known for her exquisite beauty, artistic flair, and progressive ideals, her narrative takes a poignant turn as the years unfold. Behind the grand facade, Louise battled burgeoning financial pressure, marking a stark contrast to the extravagant lifestyles of previous royals. Her decline wasn't one of opulence but rather a consequence of muted neglect, shifting societal norms, and the restrictions felt by noble women of her time. Louise entered the world in 1848, the sixth offspring of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, during a period of unparalleled splendor for the British monarchy. Defying the expectations placed on princesses, she emerged as a skilled sculptor, passionately advocating for women's education and engaging with a vibrant crowd of artists and scholars. Her 1871 marriage to John Campbell, later the Duke of Argyll, was heralded as a modern union, yet it proved financially challenging. Unlike typical royal marriages that ushered in wealth, Louise's alliance lacked such fortune. Though noble, her husband wasn't among the wealthiest of peers. His Scottish estates were grand yet financially burdensome, with income that varied. Accompanying John to Canada as Governor-General in 1878, Louise fulfilled her royal duties gracefully, albeit at significant personal cost. Their official allowances barely covered their expenses, forcing them to deplete personal savings to sustain their lifestyle abroad. Upon their return to Britain, their financial woes intensified. Though their marriage remained free from public scandal, emotional distance grew, with the couple often maintaining separate residences. While Louise sought solace in her art, producing income through modest exhibitions and commissions, her royal stipend, constrained by court protocols, barely sufficed. With John's passing in 1914, Louise confronted the stark realities of widowhood, stripped of the financial cushion one would expect as a queen's daughter. Limited savings compelled her to drastically downsize her lifestyle. During World War I and the subsequent years, she led a life of quiet introspection split between Kensington Palace and quaint retreats, parting with servants and possessions to alleviate her financial burdens. Correspondence from friends depicted her as proud and reserved, steadfast in her refusal to appear pitiful amidst her constrained living conditions. By her passing in 1939, this once energetic princess had faded into obscurity, leaving behind not material wealth, but a profound legacy of integrity, creativity, and resilience. Louise's financial trials mirrored a broader evolution of monarchy, shifting from inherited affluence to constitutional roles and austere lifestyles. In the twilight years of an empire, another of Victoria's children, Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, faced his own understated struggle against financial constraints. His frail health, medical expenses, and premature death left his family grappling with the financial pressures of a life cloaked in royal expectations, yet distanced from royal richness. Unveiling the life of Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, a tale of royal struggle. Born in 1853, Prince Leopold, the youngest son of Queen Victoria, stepped into a world seemingly draped in comfort and security. But his existence, fraught with illness, penned a poignant narrative within the ongoing saga of royal tribulations. Haemophilia, an inherited blood disorder that haunted Victoria's lineage, forced him to navigate life with extreme caution, dependent on daily medical care and grappling with the fragility of his health. His physical vulnerabilities and the burden of frequent medical expenses placed significant strain on his limited financial resources, ultimately leaving his wife and children with far less than one would expect for a royal figure. From an early age, Leopold was aware of the constraints his condition imposed. Denied the chance to serve in the military or partake in vigorous pursuits, he turned to the realms of literature and philosophy, cultivating his mind in ways that many of his peers did not. Known for his intelligence, grace, and compassion, he embodied a rarer blend of sensibility and kindness among the royals of his era. While Queen Victoria was heavily involved in his life, her anxiety over his well-being and financial matters lingered constantly. He received a lesser stipend compared to his brothers, and despite his mother's generous support, her stringent views on spending cast a shadow over his circumstances. Longing for independence, Leopold dedicated himself to philanthropy, contributing to hospitals, universities, and the arts. His heart was particularly drawn to improving the plight of working-class students, even as he struggled with his own tight budget. Yet, the weight of his generous spirit often overshadowed his financial limitations. His allowance, despite being adequate by many standards, fell short when it came to funding both his noble causes and the demands of daily life, compounded by relentless medical expenses. In 1882, he married Princess Helena of Waldeck-Pyrmont, a bond founded on shared determination. Their early years together were filled with modesty and quiet contentment, far removed from royal extravagance. They worked to raise their 2 children while navigating the expectations of society against a backdrop of financial reality. Nevertheless, Leopold's health spiraled downward, with doctors recommending warmer winters in southern France, introducing yet another layer of financial strain to their lives. Tragedy struck in 1884 when, at the age of 31, Leopold suffered a fatal fall in Cannes, likely instigated by a hemorrhage linked to his haemophilia. His untimely departure plunged his widow and young children into a state of financial uncertainty. While Parliament offered them a pension, it hardly sufficed to uphold the respectability expected of a royal household. Helena, facing her challenges, bore the weight of living frugally, relying on support from Queen Victoria and her son-in-law, Prince Charles Edward, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Leopold's life serves as a somber reminder of the fragility faced by even those born into opulence. A prince bound by health woes and constrained means, his legacy exemplifies how royal privilege cannot shield against the unforgiving reality of illness and unrelenting financial demands. Echoing this narrative, his grandfather, Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, the father of Queen Victoria, had faced similar trials, battling debts during his exile that nearly tarnished his legacy until his daughter's reign brought him vindication in the annals of history. Prince Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathern, was born into a world of privilege yet plagued by relentless misfortune and financial strain. Although he sired Queen Victoria, one of Britain's most illustrious monarchs, Edward's life was one of continuous decline, burdened by debt and overspending. His adult years were spent evading creditors, negotiating loans, and living abroad, desperately trying to escape his mounting financial woes. By 1820, when he passed away, he found himself deeply indebted, clinging to a shred of respectability thanks to a late royal marriage. Born in 1767 as the 4th son of King George III, Edward matured in a family where his chances for power were limited. He took the conventional route for royal sons, enlisting in the army and serving in various territories. However, his military career was marred by extravagance and scandal. On foreign postings, notably in Gibraltar, he lived extravagantly. His elaborate tastes and insistence on lavish ceremonies drained his finances, leading to scandalous events that caused a rift with his father and a reduction of his allowance. Driven to the European continent by insurmountable debts, Edward sought refuge mainly in Brussels and later Germany, where his financial mismanagement continued to haunt him. He maintained an extravagant lifestyle, filled with musicians and entertainment, funded through borrowing. In a stroke of luck in 1818, the royal family faced a succession crisis, prompting Edward to marry Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, a prudent union aimed at financial restoration. Parliament responded with a pledge to replenish his income, hoping for a legitimate heir, a plan that bore fruit with the birth of his daughter in May 1819. Yet, tragedy struck soon after. Edward fell ill and succumbed to pneumonia in January 1820. His legacy was not one of riches or property, but instead staggering debts and a widow left to raise their infant daughter on a meagre pension. Queen Victoria, who would inherit both his name and his caution with money, would manage royal finances with all the care her father lacked. Edward's financial blunders would ultimately shape the monarchy's future. Without his precarious existence, their strategically motivated marriage might never have occurred, leaving Britain without the stability ushered in by the Victorian era. As we reflect on Prince Edward's tale, we uncover a profound lesson. Behind the facade of royal grandeur lie generations of nobility battling financial ruin. In their triumphs and tribulations, history reveals the sobering truth that wealth devoid of discipline and power lacking prudence can lead even the most exalted to the precipice of want.